Welcome to the Wise Fiduciary Podcast. I'm Marta Hurst. If you're a plan sponsor, committee member, advisor, or an executive responsible for a retirement plan, this show is for you. Season 5 is about the Fiduciary Red Line, the moment where it feels like you're doing the right thing, but you're not. It's where industry standard stops being safe and where a routine decision quietly becomes exposure. Each episode, we're taking one decision point to examine it closely, not from a sales or marketing perspective, but from a fiduciary one. Because most plan failures don't begin with bad intentions. They begin with comfort. So let's define the red line. Today, we're talking about the moment you should have asked for outside help. This is our final episode of the season, and this season was about moments where plans crossed a line without even realizing it. Most sponsors don't ignore fiduciary duty, and just like we talk about, it doesn't begin with bad intentions. People get comfortable, they get complacent, and they overestimate their ability to carry it alone. They probably lack time, knowledge, or desire. Why are employers outsourcing fiduciary liability? Well, I just kind of gave you the cheat sheet, but it's not about laziness or abdication or even avoidance. It's really about recognizing when a plan has evolved, when the environment has changed, Secure 2.0, the expectations of fiduciaries now exceed what internal governance can realistically deliver, or you don't have the time, you don't have the expertise, or you don't have the desire. We also see a lot of HR teams are really stretched. Employers are trying to run their businesses, and yet they're left with this liability related to the plan. So the red line is crossed the moment that independence stops servicing the plan and starts exposing it. Not whether you can handle it, but if you should, and recognizing when expertise is necessary. I think there's a myth in retirement plans of we should be able to handle this. And I remember one of my first conversations, I was a TPA for years before I moved to the fiduciary side. And I had a meeting with a prospective client. We started talking a little bit about fiduciary duty. And she was like, yeah, I think we got this. And I think about that a lot because I knew that there was more that could be done to help her. But she just thought, I think we got it. Employers don't usually start intending to outsource fiduciary responsibility. I think independence is often a point of pride, but ERISA does not reward effort. It evaluates outcomes against expertise and process. So when is it time to consider an outside fiduciary? When fiduciary duty becomes a second job, when plan oversight competes with core business priorities. I think this goes back to that time piece. Employers, businesses they're trying to do their thing. They're making their widgets, whatever it is that the business does, having to focus on the retirement plan when it's taking away from other business priorities, when it's becoming a lot more to take on. When good enough quietly replaces best interest, we see that a lot on our side. We always want to do things in the best interest of the plan participants. When that's no longer the case, it's just good enough. When you're getting lots of help, but you're the one who makes the decision and is liable. This is one of the most common stories or kind of rebuttals I hear from advisors. This is nothing against advisors. In fact, they're very helpful. Advisors say to me, well, my client doesn't really need the services of another fiduciary because I help them do that. I do this, I do their benchmark, I do these things, I remind them of this, and all of that is very legitimate and very helpful. The difference is, not the only difference, but I do know some advisors who are very involved and do a lot of things. The difference is there's no shift in liability. The help that you are providing is helpful, but ultimately if that plan sponsor does the wrong thing, makes the wrong decision, they're ultimately on the hook for the decisions that they make for the plan. So this is different than a help. I'm talking today about actually delegating to an outside fiduciary. The most underestimated fiduciary constraint: time is not neutral in fiduciary governance. Lack of time erodes process. So even though you might have committee meetings that you have quarterly, fiduciary responsibility is ongoing. Preparation, documentation, benchmarking, following up, all of that happens outside of the meeting. So a lot of employers really underestimate the time truly required to evaluate investments prudently, track regulatory changes, reassess decisions continuously, and document substantive procedural prudence. We have a slide that we do in our intro meetings, and it talks about the things we do before our client meetings and the things we do after our client meetings. And I feel like I often gloss over those because I'm like, well, I mean, does it really matter what we do before and after? But it does, because if you are on a retirement plan committee, you have an obligation to know about these things. The committee meeting is really supposed to be about conversation and discussions, not a review of information. If you have an outside fiduciary, then it might be more a review of information, but taking care of these things and making sure that the things done between the meetings get done, that's an ongoing responsibility. It's not just show up and check some boxes. All right, let's talk about expertise, knowing about versus knowing enough. General knowledge is not fiduciary expertise. Investment complexity has increased dramatically. Not to mention, we've got the regular investments. Now we've got in-plan annuities, managed accounts, alternative investments, CITs. So remember, every investment has to be evaluated and stand on its own. So if you are on a retirement plan committee and you've got managed accounts, for example, that has to be evaluated as well as every other investment. And these in-plan annuities, I'll tell you, I've been to a bunch of presentations and I'm still working through it. So fortunately, we've got people on our team that are smarter than me, but these are not easy concepts. Fee structures that are layered, meaning you see one fee, but there's multiple parties being paid out of that. Maybe some of it's being paid back to somebody else. So it's complicated. Who is getting paid what? How do you know? Who do you trust to find out and give you the information straight? Litigation standards are precise and they're retrospective. So Monday morning quarterback. How was that decision made and was it at highest standard? All of the scrutiny comes after the fact when somebody knows a better decision could have been made. And how did you get to the one that you did? And was it the best with the information that was available at the time? Not just the information you got, but the information that was available at the time. Many committee members are competent professionals, but they are not full-time fiduciaries. Maybe even more so in larger organizations. There's a lot of liability to be had with these larger retirement plans, and those committee members have time and skill and expertise that they really need to be applying to their part of the business, not just to the retirement plan. When you are making decisions for a retirement plan, you are supposed to do it with the care, skill, and prudence of someone who would act in a like capacity that is familiar with such matters. Meaning, if you are making decisions in a retirement plan, you should be making those with the care, skill, prudence, and diligence of someone who is familiar with retirement plans. Who can really claim that? If you are not in the retirement plan business, how can you claim to be making decisions with that level of expertise? Expertise being different than experience, which is also important when considering fiduciary outsourcing, and that is seeing the risk before it's obvious. Experience isn't academic, it's pattern recognition because it's things that you have seen over and over again. Experienced fiduciaries have seen litigation unfold. They have watched reasonable choices fail under scrutiny. Employers often are encountering these risks for the very first time. And I've talked about that before with prospective clients and advisors as well. Fiduciary Wise works with a number of different providers, advisors, record keepers, auditors, TPAs, every different service level. We know what good service looks like. We know what good work looks like, and we know what doesn't. Most employers, they're dealing with this plan, maybe one other. Occasionally you find an HR person who's been involved in multiple plans, but the experience level just isn't there because you haven't seen it from other angles. The fiduciary reality is that courts judge decisions in hindsight. So it's that having that level of experience and seeing that the patterns of things is important from a protection standpoint. Also, I think it's important that outsourcing become a strategic act and not just a reaction. We have had people call us and they say, okay, we're in trouble. We've made a mess. Help us fiduciary wise. It happens. But I think plan committees have the opportunity to be more strategic and think about what they really want for the plan, what they want for their committee members, and liability that they want to expose themselves to. So a named fiduciary provides structured authority, documented decision-making, and then independence from internal pressures. We have been a part of plans where there's some internal politics, and it's nice to kind of serve as the scapegoat sometimes. Well, fiduciary-wise said we had to do it this way. We can work independent from those. Employers still retain oversight for any level of fiduciary care or fiduciary outsourcing. You still have to have some oversight. And I'm sure people have heard this in like the 338 space as well. Hiring a 338 doesn't just, now they're in charge of the investments. That's true, but you were responsible for hiring them. So what was your process for hiring them and how do you continue to monitor them? Same thing for a 402A fiduciary. If you've got somebody doing 316 fiduciary work, same for them as well. This isn't about doing less. It's about doing fiduciary governance correctly. This season was about moments where comfort replaced scrutiny. And this episode is about the moment where humility becomes protective. Strong fiduciaries don't ask, can we keep doing this ourselves? They ask, what serves the plan best now? Your plan deserves full-time fiduciary attention. And is your committee prepared to provide that? In more ways than one: time, expertise, experience, and desire. We also have people who don't want to become fiduciary experts. They don't want to become 401k experts. And I don't want to become experts in healthcare and figure out my own doctor stuff. So it is a very practical thing to be able to outsource. I've been giving homework, I think, every episode, but I think it's important if you are really responsible for a retirement plan and you are listening to these episodes to be thoughtful about what's next and to really evaluate your plan. I hope that you have done some of these homework assignments. If you are a plan fiduciary, do a little honest assessment of your committee. Are your committee members dedicating meaningful time outside of the meetings to prepare, to review, and to document? Do the meetings allow for analysis, or is this more of a reporting kind of thing? Do you leave room for discussion? Are fiduciary decisions being made between meetings due to urgency? Can your committee defend investment decisions? Do you know how to evaluate complex structures without relying on your vendors? I have been part of committees before where they're like, well, before you guys came on, we would have our record keeper come report on these things. That's super and good for them for having some information. But your committee needs to be able to understand that without just relying on the people who are also providing you the product to explain those. And then can you explain the whys? Have your committee members seen enough fiduciary failure to recognize it early or only in theory? Have you seen or been involved in lawsuits or been through any regulatory scrutiny? If any of your answers related to that made you concerned about your fiduciary risk, give us a call. If you're an advisor, I want you to think about those same questions as they relate to the committees that you work with, and be prepared to have fiduciary outsourcing discussions. It's not a replacement of you or your services. We get that hesitation sometimes. And I mentioned there are advisors who say, well, I'm doing these things. I'm helping my client. Yes, you are. We love helpers. Keep helping. But if your client wants to reduce liability, then they need to outsource that to a professional. So this is a shift of fiduciary responsibility for your client. If today's episode raised questions about your plan, that's the point. Fiduciary responsibility is not about checking boxes. It's about understanding where the red line actually is. If you want to continue the conversation, follow us on social media for more ongoing insights and commentary. And if you need clarity around your own plan decisions, if this episode made you think about your fiduciary liability, please schedule a time with our team at fiduciarywise.com/scheduling. Until next time, until next season, stay thoughtful, stay disciplined, and know where your red line is.